I'm of the belief that the human mind is so incredibly powerful and has such an influence on your reality that if you adopt those beliefs and absorb them into your subconscious, and that is what life is going to be for you. If you watch a David Goggins video where he says life is struggle and suffering and pain, and you just got to get used to it, and you got to just keep sucking it up and looking for more pain, fuck, dude, then your experience and your reality is going to keep showing you that. It's going to keep bringing that to you. But if you realize that life is this amazing game, this fun adventure to be played and to be enjoyed and savored, and you accept that as your subconscious belief, and that's what life's going to be for you.
Nick, my friend, this is number 154 and you are number one. And it's always such a treat when we get to chat.
Wow, dude. Seriously, it's 154 episodes you've done.
Yes.
Wow. You have my full respect. You know, that's, when you wanted to start this podcast, remember I said to you, don't be that guy who does like 3 episodes and then stops, bro. And you weren't. And amazing. I'm so impressed.
There was a few times where I remember I was listening to those words in my head because, 5 episodes in, you're like, what am I doing? But it's enriched my life no end. I feel like I've upgraded my thinking on so many different aspects. And part of it is it's a creative outlet for me. And that's one thing I really want to talk to you about today. After our last conversation is you were talking about the need for people who are very structured and organized and, left brain dominant to nurture that other side, that creative side. And I think you've done such a good job of that through your jiu-jitsu and through podcasting. You've written several books, but just nurturing that creative side. I think it's very easy for professionals to be successful in their profession, but very, very uncreative.
Yeah. And the more I delve into this topic, the more I'm realizing that your creative side or tapping into the creative aspect of yourself is actually the pathway, the fastest pathway to everything you want. You can do it using strictly left brain approaches, but generally that comes with a very high cost. And also generally your output is very derivative and usually just the copy of everyone else's if you focus solely on the left brain way of approaching things.
Yeah, I was thinking about society in general, how it does, especially with kids, it conforms them. So Victor was in the bath and he had these little road pieces. An adult would line them up as a road would go. And he had his zigzag into the sky. And I started to instinctually just be like, no, that's not how a road goes. And then I remembered hearing someone say, society, school, things after school, it's always going to conform you and kind of crush the creative spirit. And if you look at a lot of special people in history, they were the ability to think outside the box, people like Einstein and these incredible creative types. And so it's so hard as an adult to do that, but I try and ignore gravity and ignore the constraints of reality with him because I want him to live in his imaginary world as long as possible.
I love that. Yeah. And that imaginary world it's definitely undervalued in modern Western society. And it is, I was reading the autobiography of the filmmaker David Lynch, and he says when you do meditation, you are diving into this really deep ocean, fishing for ideas, right? And sometimes you catch these like the deeper you go into these waters, the more incredible the fish are that you catch. And I really understand that if you stay on the surface, and the surface is usually just left brain consuming content. Oh, let me just watch the news and see what was on Twitter or watch a movie or whatever it is, just like taking in, just like mindlessly consuming, staying on the surface, then you only catch the minnows, right? The little fish. But when you do things that engage your right brain and connect you with that part of yourself, and you do them continuously and you get proficient at them, then you start going down into those deeper waters and you start finding these bigger fish. So yeah, don't ever let Victor's enjoyment of his imagination or his use of it, don't ever constrain that. That would not be good parenting, in my opinion.
Yeah. I remember you said that to me quite a few years ago. You said, don't always just consume things. Because I was always of the approach, why would I write a book when I can read and learn from people better than me? Or why would I create a podcast when I can listen to people that are better than me? I always had that approach. And I think you were the one that told me you were one of the inspirations for doing this. And it's given me so much satisfaction. And I think it upgrades your thinking when you're forced to think about things on the spot and have people question your ideas as opposed to always just mindlessly consuming. And unfortunately, we live in a time where there's so much good content out there. You can spend the rest of your life just watching awesome shows on Netflix. It's all out there, but that's not necessarily the path to either an enlightened or a really happy existence.
And sometimes it's actually contrary to the path, or it's an anathema to the path, because what I've come to discover is if you are constantly consuming content, it's very difficult to create anything original of your own because it's all colored by what you've been consuming. So when I enter the creative or start the creative process on any sort of project that I want to embark upon, I actively stop consuming stuff because I want the ideas that come through me to be original and fresh and unique. And I'm sure you've seen this when you're reading a specific book about a certain topic, you start thinking within the constraints of that book and all that author's ideas, right? They're the freshest in your mind. You have recency bias, and it's obvious that that's how you're going to start thinking. So, often I was thinking about a book I was writing recently on jiu-jitsu. I just said, okay, no more consuming any jiu-jitsu content because I don't want to just parrot someone else's ideas, right? And you're right, society, in fact, even jiu-jitsu, which is generally, jiu-jitsu, it's been my experience that it's generally a community of non-conformists. But the funny thing is they all conform incredibly strictly. If you're honest with yourself, most jiu-jitsu guys, it's just copying. It's, oh, this guy showed me this, and I'm going to copy it. My teacher showed me this, I'm going to copy it and then regurgitate it to the next guy. And hey, I do the same thing myself. You came and taught some technique at our academy the other day, and it was great technique, and I've been teaching it to my students. But the real difficult thing is to stop and sit down and think, okay, I've got this particular problem, or I want to create something. Where do I start? What does it look like? What components does it need? As opposed to just jumping on YouTube and getting the answer, or listening to a podcast where someone gives you a prepackaged answer. And that's difficult. It requires mental effort, and our minds get very lazy. I know I've seen it with my own mind. My own thinking process has become very lazy over the last several years because the answers are just there with AI or, as I said, YouTube or podcasts or whatever. There's so much information. So you're never really forced to sit down and be like, okay, what can I bring from the source and bring into reality?
One of the things that I really enjoyed the recent biography on Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. And the big takeaway of the book was that's what he did is he'd always have these problems, like when he was trying to figure out how to send rockets to Mars. He said, well, instead of just looking at what the cost is, for instance, like he looked at what it would cost a big company like Boeing to do a certain part. And then he would actually analyze why and how he could cut the costs. And he would do things at 2-3% of the price that it would take these big companies because these big bloated bureaucracies had so much inefficiency. So he was always trying to look at problems and just cut them down to the rawest principles and then kind of rebuild it from there in a more efficient way. And it kind of reminded me of before we met in person, when I first knew of you. It was your first book, I think, the Black Belt Blueprint. And you kind of did that with jiu-jitsu, where it wasn't just a manual of jiu-jitsu techniques. It was, why does a certain position work? What makes a sweep effective? And you did the same thing. You went back to first principles and you talk about that. And in the years I've come to know you, a lot of time you teach like that. You teach seminars based on principles, not techniques, because you can just pull up YouTube and see infinite techniques. But principles are a bit more useful where you can create your own style.
Mm. I'm just going to pretty much piss off everything I've just said and reference a book I'm reading at the moment that is informing my thought process now. But it's closely related to what you said. In this book, this gentleman identifies 5 key components of a good person, and one of them is pragmatism. And he defines pragmatism as just doing what is required without any emotional attachment to your own previous methods or beliefs. And that's something I was really happy to read that in the book because I realized that is how I am. I do not care. I've got no attachment to anything or to anything when it comes to performance. I just want to know what works. If you're always better, I'll take it. I'm not doing things because they come from a place of guilt or they come from a place of, well, everyone else does this, or David Goggins said I should torture myself and whip myself, or Joe Rogan says, I don't care about any of that. I just want to know what works. And I think that's a really good characteristic to have, is just to be pragmatic without attachment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Also, one of the ideas, you have those incredible videos on YouTube, the spirit of jiu-jitsu. and the soul of jiu-jitsu. One thing you said in one of them, I forget which one, is you talked about the idea of play, of jiu-jitsu being adult play. And, I'm a huge fan of Nabil Ravikant, and I just read, he said, to the experts, what looks like hard work from the outside is often play from the inside. And I love the idea of jiu-jitsu being a form of play for adults. And I think sorry, I keep talking about my son, but I feel like I've learned so much from just watching him. Like if you look at kids, they're never worrying about the future or lamenting on the past. They're always in the present, in the moment, and they're looking to be playful, and they learn through play. And I think that's I always find it so sad when I see an adult who maybe on paper is successful, but they're not very happy. They don't seem like they enjoy what they do. They're just kind of going through the motions, almost like a, mechanistic way, like a robot. And I think that's one thing I've learned from you, is just try to imbue the spirit of play more as an adult. Don't think that play has to stop just because we're older.
100%. There's in hustle culture, really, I think I've developed a disdain for hustle culture. I think it's pretty toxic, because it's rooted in this idea that like life is hard and life is struggle, and that you've got to force yourself to do the things you don't want to do. And I'm of the belief that the human mind is so incredibly powerful and has such an influence on your reality that if you adopt those beliefs and absorb them into your subconscious, and that is what life is going to be for you. If you like watch a David Goggins video where he says life is struggle and suffering and pain, and you just got to get used to it, and you got to just keep sucking it up and looking for more pain, fuck, dude, then your experience and your reality is going to keep showing you that. It's going to keep bringing that to you. But if you realize that life is this amazing game, this fun adventure to be played and to be enjoyed and savored, and you accept that as your subconscious belief, and that's what life's going to be for you. And the fact is, if through the gather I've dated, I've realized that both of those methods can take you where you want to go. I've seen people who have self-flagellated and been masochistic and fucking ground and driven their way and been super ambitious to get where they want to go. And I've seen people who've also just had a lot of fun and done it. But what I've also seen is those two things, they both might take you to where you want to go, but one comes with a much greater cost than the other. And it's a cost that I don't want to pay. If you look at a lot of those dudes, yeah, okay, maybe they made a couple $1 million or built a huge company or whatever it might be, or got the gold medal or whatever. Sometimes it's cost them their soul. It's literally cost them their soul, and they've become, shells of who they used to be or what they could have been. And nah, bro, that's not my go around in this lifetime, right? If that's the cost, I was going to say if that's the cost, I'm not going to do it. But it doesn't have to be the cost. We've been programmed to believe that's the cost, and it's not.
Well, that's so true. That reminds me of, I post a lot of stories where I'm at the park with my son and the dogs. And I always use like reggae songs. And I've been thinking recently, I want this to be the soundtrack of my life, like a very upbeat, lots of love, like that reggaeton kind of that theme. I want that to be the theme of my life. And sometimes when I'm driving to work, if I'm a little bit stressed, I'll play a few songs. And it really gets me in that mindset where life is great. I'm so blessed to do what I do. It's just, it's not changing the reality as much as changing your mindset towards reality. And what you said about David Goggins is so true. I like him. I'm actually wearing one of his t-shirts my friend gave me right now. But I have a friend who absolutely loves him. And sometimes I think that he's got that problem that you mentioned where he puts himself in a position where, yeah, life is struggle and I've just got to toughen up, as opposed to just like, you can see a problem as just that creative aspect of I'm going to solve this problem. It's going to be fun, as opposed to I've got to be so tough. I've got to solve these problems. It's the same thing you're doing. You're still solving problems, but your mindset's different. And I'll say that's one of the massive things that I get if I'm a little bit high and I'm doing a bunch of work. Instead of it being something that's maybe drudgery, I have to spend 90 minutes going through all these emails and doing all these tasks. Marijuana, for me, very mild doses, it makes my brain enjoy problem solving. And so I see something that normally would be drudgery as actually kind of mentally fun and like a mental game that I have to do. So it's so interesting. Just what you said is so true. I guess that's the whole Stoic philosophy. Don't try and change the world to match what you want. Just change your mindset to your situation, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I that's interesting what you said about cannabis. It's made me, I don't really use cannabis anymore because I always find the juice isn't worth the squeeze in my own experience. And it comes with paranoia and a bunch of other things that I just don't appreciate. And my my general state of mind, or my normal state of mind or state of consciousness is actually so good now that I don't like to fuck with it, because it's like, yeah, sure, it might get a little bit better, but it can also get worse. And it's so good now. Like, why mess with the current formula? So, but still, you've made me think, and like, it's always in the back of my mind, maybe I should just go get a few gummies and, take them before I do some riding or something like that.
But you said, why change a winning formula? It just reminded me, I had a buddy of mine, he had the same haircut for 20 years, never ever changed it. And I've had every haircut known to man. And one day he said to me, he said, man, you're always changing your hair. He's like, you know why I never changed my hair? And I said, no. He said, why change a winning formula? Yeah, that's true. Sometimes it's working. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. I think about this thing, the motivational triad, often, which is that, the organism is motivated by three things, which is it moves towards pleasure, it moves away from pain, and it tries to conserve energy. And I understand, I really do get the philosophy of like, overcoming the organism, right? Like overcoming your animalistic desires and drives. I really get that. But at the same time, I mean, there's a reason those things are there, right? There's a reason those things have been fucking hardwired into every cell of your body. Every cell of your body is trying to preserve itself. It's looking for safety and preservation, right? There's a reason for that. And then when you really go against those things and fuck with them, sure, it can maybe bring some short-term or mid-term benefits, but it's always going to have a long-term cost, right? Always. There's no way around it.
One of my big pet peeves about politics, for instance, is they try and offer like these black and white solutions. And Thomas Sowell said it best. There's only trade-offs. So for all the people that were so happy in 2020 to get these stimulus checks, then everyone's left with inflation for the next 4 years. There is no free lunch in life. Every single decision you make, you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And just that idea of just being a bit more cognizant of trade-offs in life, I think is such a powerful concept.
Yeah, I would say that there's no such thing as a free lunch in life is a limiting belief. I don't subscribe to that. I think there are many things in life which come with no costs and only benefits. Air is one of them. Oxygen. There's no cost to you, and it's unlimited and it's abundant, and it will improve the more deeply you breathe and the better you're breathing, the better your life, right? Like sunshine is another one. Sunshine's free, right? Puts you in a good mood, makes the plants grow. I mean, the love of your family, like there's no trade-off. It's just good. You know what I mean? Like I think that's a very limiting belief. I would urge you to re-examine that belief.
I love what you said, but I think we're saying different things. So when I said, the love of your family is a great example. If I say yes to work opportunity that keeps me away from the house, then I'm saying no to time with my family. I guess that's what I meant. I meant that a lot of the time we don't see the real cost in things, and having a son who changes every few weeks has made me appreciate just even the passage of time a lot more than before. Before, I didn't appreciate when I was 36, 37, 38. Those years meant nothing to me. But now I see that I'm never going to get this period back with him. I feel like it's made me much more appreciative of just things like the passage of time.
I understand. Yeah.
Well, what you said, Nick, is so true. I think the things for being a healthy person, there's a doctor on Instagram, I forget his name, but my friend always sends me his stuff. He talks a lot about things like that, like breathing deeply for a few minutes before you start your day and getting out in the sunshine. Even in an overcast day, you're still going to get all these benefits just walking barefoot on grass or getting a few minutes of sunshine on your face in the morning. Just these little things that are free, but they make a huge difference in the way you feel and the way your body responds to life.
The best things in life are free. We all heard that when we were a kid. It was I was part of some song, I heard a lyric in some song. I never really analyzed it until maybe a year ago. And then I started thinking to myself, it's true. All the best things in my life, sure. Like, okay, I was going to say my pets, right? Yeah. Okay. But I pay to feed my pets, right? And to take them to the vet and everything. But their love and the quality time I spend with them, it doesn't cost me anything really, or said sunshine or air or the time with my friends or taking a nice walk or just enjoying nature, whatever, like just enjoying a simple thing like biting into a fresh apple Okay, yeah, you've got to pay for the apple, but it's like I'm trying to get around that idea of like, oh yeah, everything you have to pay for everything. Everything's a trade-off. I've experienced that the best things in my life actually just came to me without any. I didn't have to go hunting for them or searching for them or whatever. They were always just there, and the only thing that my striving could do would be to cover them up. Like one of them is the connection to myself, right? The most important thing in my life to me is my connection, my deep internal connection to myself, how I feel in my body, right? That feeling of safety and security and just knowing that I can take care of myself. That it was always there. I just covered it up through childhood trauma and society's projections of what I should be doing and looking and comparing myself to other people and, oh, I should do this or I should do that. And no, dude, it was always just there waiting for me under all of that. And now, like, I don't fall for the David Goggins stuff anymore. I don't fall for that stuff anymore because I don't need it. I don't need some guy telling me how to eat, how to drink, how to breathe, how to move, how to have sex, how to invest. I don't need any of that because I have my own internal guidance system. I don't need gurus. I don't read books. I read books for pleasure now. It's not because I need the answer. It's because I don't need them anymore. I found what I was looking for and it was there all along.
So how did you find that? Was that through meditation? Like, did you think everyone can find that, or you think it does take some time and some struggles?
Well, it cost a lot of money. Bro, you know what it was, dude? It was just looking in so many places and trying so hard and failing so often. I was like, it can't be out there because I've looked everywhere. I've looked in the jungles of the Amazon. I've looked fucking in yoga. I've looked in jiu-jitsu. I've looked in money. I've looked in women. I've looked in psychedelics. I've looked in gurus. I've looked in mentors. I've looked in this country. I've looked in that country. I've looked in this book. I've read, and I just realized it's nowhere. It's in you. It's like it's not outside. It's in you, right? And that's why, like, now it's the strangest thing. I will read a book on a topic, that I want to know more about, or I will engage with something, but I've realized that the fulfillment and safety and security are not to be found in those things. It's impossible. It's impossible.
Do you think it would have been possible for you to come to the same conclusion without the life you've lived? Because for people that don't know, you've trained and taught all around the world. You've done a lot of incredible things, and they say how much you learn from just like one, living in a country for a year that's not of your birth. I feel like you learn so much, and you're exposed to a different culture, a different way of thinking, and you've done that so many times. You have lived an extraordinary life through jiu-jitsu and through your natural curiosity and the way when you were young, you really wanted to experience life and you wanted to do this, travel around the world. Do you think you could have got that same wisdom if you hadn't?
I mean, there are definitely people who are born with that, right? It's everyone's born with it. There's people who just born and then it doesn't get covered up, right? And you know what I realized, Lawrence, is life is so vast and so broad that there are examples of everything. You can find examples of guys who became enlightened while they were mending shoes. You can find examples of people who became enlightened when they was like on their knees with a gun in their face. You can find examples of housewives who were picking up their kids from school and became enlightened. It is so broad and so vast that, like, to answer your question, most certainly anyone could, or there are people who have arrived at knowledge and wisdom in many different ways, right? Like, I don't think there's a recipe. I'm starting to understand there's not a recipe. It's like when your frequency is right, or when your karma determines it, or when the time is right, when it's your lifetime or whatever, you'll find we're all where we're supposed to be, right? Like, I think there are things that you can do to maybe facilitate it. Like, I'm a big believer that your frequency, the vibration at which you're, or the frequency at which you're vibrating determines to a large extent what happens in your life. And I think you can affect that vibration through things like breathwork and meditation and a lot of the things that I found on the journey. I think they definitely did change my vibration in a way, but it might have changed through something else if I hadn't gone that way. You know what I mean?
Yes. One thing I always think about is when I was at my most wealthy, I think I was 29 when I was trading. That was my by far my most wealthy. And I haven't come close to that since then. And it was so wonderful to me because when I looked at myself back then, I lived a very humble life. And that was just before I turned pro fighting MMA. And I looked at what I did in the weekends, and it wasn't getting a table at the hottest club in Chicago and pulling up with a Ferrari and being like that. It was go to the gym 3-4 times a day and do my laundry. Like it was it was the things that I was trying to do that I had this burning desire and this love for that was completely internal. And that if someone had told me when I was 23, hey, listen, don't worry about the pursuit of money because it's not going to make you happy, I don't know if I would have believed them. I had to almost get there to realize that this isn't what I should be chasing. And so I think that's one thing that it's really useful. And I think you do get so much wisdom when you are young and you take risks and you go to different countries and you expose yourself to different things, because then you get those lessons. There's different ways to get lessons. I think it's so interesting what you said, because it is true. You do have the cobbler that finds wisdom through cobbling shoes, and he's maybe lived in the same town that he grew up in. So he hasn't gone anywhere, but he still attains that wisdom. But I still think it's easier to do it when you take great risk and you put yourself out there and you go to different countries and you put yourself in hard positions. And I think it's funny because you talked earlier about you don't need to be that David Goggins type person, but for people that don't know, you've had a lifetime in jiu-jitsu. I've always you, you're a beast. So you have put decades of hard work into something physical and tangible to learn, to attain this skill. But then you realize that you didn't need it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, maybe I'm just being naive, and maybe you cannot extricate experience from who a person ultimately has become. I definitely don't think you can. Like, the person I am today is a result of my experiences largely, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think I would have probably become a very similar person if I'd taken some different experiences. I think, like, my essence, we all have this intrinsic essence, right? And it's always there, right? And you're just trying to uncover it.
I think how interesting it would have been, Nick, if I had never discovered martial arts. And I was kind of big into soccer when I was young. And if I had just been all about soccer when I was 12 and not gone down the journey of martial arts, just how different I would have been. And it's such a fascinating thought experiment to think about how different you would have been. And just these couple of
I don't think so. I'm trying to, like, I think it's probably just the left brain's propensity to, like, counter or to propose a counter argument. But what came to me was I see in my mind a picture of you, like, having played soccer and followed that path. And I see you as being the same guy, just with a different set of life experiences. Your essence would still be the same. It'd still be that Lawrence, you know what I mean? Like, but with just a different set of experiences, maybe slightly different. But that, what's that study? It wasn't a study, but it was a phenomenon that occurred where the set of twins was separated at birth, and they found that they were living almost identical lives. They had married women with the same names, they had the same careers, they had similar hobbies. I think that our essence is largely overlooked in the role it plays in determining our lives. But again, I don't know. I don't fucking know, bro. I don't know.
I guess if that's true, it's kind of that debate on free will, or not, like, how much free will do we have? And I think that's what makes you a lot more compassionate than a lot of people with people that are down on their luck. And it's definitely something that you've helped me see, because when I was younger, I had a pretty nice middle-class upbringing in England, and I had all the opportunities that you have from having two loving parents. And so many people grow up with the dads, they've never met their dad, and their mom is, addicted to drugs, and they have absolutely nothing, and they live in some, trailer park or some ghetto, and they just don't have close to the opportunities that I got. And so I don't think I'd be where I am today if I had that kind of upbringing versus mine. So it definitely makes you more appreciative. I think it's so easy for people to have any success, whether it's in career, whether it's in sports, whether it's in love, whatever kind of success they have, and they worked hard at it, to say, well, it was all due to my hard work. And you were one of the people that made me appreciate that, yes, of course, there's work involved in everything, but you also had, the genetic gift to have determination. You also had opportunity. So I definitely, I'm much more open to that way of thinking.
Yeah. And there's also something that a lot of people don't think about, which is a survivorship bias, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah, you see Elon Musk, and he tells you how he did it. He went through this series of steps. And then everyone thinks, okay, well, if I just follow that series of steps, I'm going to be successful. But you don't see the other 10,000 dudes that followed that series of steps and that didn't make it.
Yeah.
And what I'm starting to realize, and again, I can only speak from a perspective that is informed by the data I've gathered through my own observations and experiences, right? So what I'm about to say may or may not be true, but my own unique and very subjective experience leads me to believe that there is truth to it, which is it doesn't actually matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how hard you work, what formula you follow. If your frequency is not set properly, you will not make it where you want to go. So for example, if you are in survival mode and you are a very negative person, or you're carrying some heavy subconscious trauma, and you start working really hard, all you're going to do is perpetuate and expand and turbocharge all those negative emotions and that low frequency, and you will just attract more of that, right? So to me, I noticed this with myself. Like now things are getting easier and easier because my frequency is getting higher and higher. So I attract better and better things into my life. Whereas there was a point several years ago where it didn't matter. As I told you, everything I was trying didn't work. Nothing worked. I couldn't figure it out. Now looking back, I'm understanding that it's because my frequency was low, because I was operating from a place of lack and insecurity and fear, right? And now I've refined my consciousness and my system. I've literally like been doing work on my central nervous system to alleviate all that trauma, or to process all that trauma and all those negative emotions and all that fear and guilt and shame and all that baggage that we're given at the start of our lives often, or at least I was in my case. And now my frequency is so much better when I do work, when I do hard work. It's compounded, it's multiplied in a positive way, not in a negative way. It's not drawing me down. I mean, surely you've seen that. There's certain dudes that they say, oh, I can't get my shit together, or I'm so unlucky, or nothing works for me. It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're doing the wrong things. It's because your frequency is too low.
So the obvious question is, how can I raise my frequency?
That is the obvious question. So to me, the biggest, as human beings, the biggest ability we have to modulate it that I've found so far is breath work. Sorry, I should rephrase that, is the nervous system. It's the nervous system. I think the frequency is largely a function of your nervous system. I believe that your nervous system is the interface between the physical reality and the unseen world, right? And I believe that the unseen world actually dictates everything that's going on. There's a bunch of energetic relationships between everything that exists that generally we can't see, right? Because they're not available, or they're not perceptible by our physical senses. And the nervous system is, as I said, the interface between the physical three-dimensional realm that we live in and operate in, and that unseen world where our higher self and our soul operates. And the way you can increase or vibrate at a higher frequency is to work with that nervous system, tune it. Like it holds all your trauma, it holds all these negative things that hold us back. So the way you can tune it, I've had a lot of success over the last several months, in fact, with breath work, really doing a lot of intensive breath work practices. Again, I'm kind of hesitant to even say that because, breath work is it's starting to become one of those bandwagon things now, the same way cold plunges were, the same way keto was. I mean, there's a new thing every 6 months, there's a new thing, right? But breath work is actually an ancient practice. There's many ancient yogic and Vedic systems of breath work that masters have been using for thousands of years to accelerate themselves. And I've been very committed and been very conscientious with breathwork practice, and I'm noticing things are changing, things are shifting. I'm becoming a different person. So I would say, if you want bang for your buck, start with breathwork. The other thing you can start doing as well is just changing your beliefs, right? Like examining your beliefs. A lot of us have beliefs which keep us at low frequency, such as life is suffering, life is struggle. I mean, there's millions of them. We all have dozens and dozens of limiting beliefs, but like really trying to identify what those are and change them, right? Like that will help raise your frequency. Meditation and just being with yourself and spending time in nature and doing the things you enjoy, doing the things you love. Like that will raise your frequency. Saying good things, thinking good things, just being a good person, surrounding yourself with people who have a higher frequency or a similar frequency to help bring you up, that will help. And those are pretty much the ones I'm using at the moment.
Well, I love that. There was an interview with the UFC fighter Dustin Poirier, and he was talking about how when he's kind of had a really great late career resurgence, and he talked about one of the things he does is he goes out with these dogs and he just goes out in nature by himself. No phone, no music, no podcast, just him and nature, and how rejuvenating that is. And it's such a simple concept, but going back to what we said before, with all this great content and things we can listen to, it is hard because before, I remember when I was boxing, pre-smartphone, cell phones, but no smartphones, a lot of the time I'd be on the way to the gym and I would just sit there, take 30 minutes, I'd take a bus there, and I would just be with my thoughts and thinking about, the things that are on my mind and processing things. And we have all this dead time like that where we organize thoughts and we really thought about things. And we've lost, a lot of people have lost that dead time. For the longest time, I was doing that. I was always wanting to consume more. And it was you again that said, sometimes you got to take a break from that and just be with your thoughts and think about things and let things just kind of fester in your mind. I think that's so important. So the idea of dead time and then being in nature, we evolved to be in nature. We didn't evolve to be in these concrete cities. And that's been a huge change for me to leave Chicago and come to Northwest Indiana, where I'm surrounded by farmland. It's been really, really huge for my mental health and my happiness. People always say like, how are you doing? How are you doing it? You're missing Chicago? And it's like, I'm so happy to be surrounded by nature. I just think it's such a much more natural environment.
I cannot disagree with anything you've said. What I will say, one of my own quirks and idiosyncrasies is that and it's because my left brain was so overdeveloped and running the show for so long, I developed the habit of paying exceptionally close attention to language. And one of the ways I got through life using half a brain for a long time was being acutely aware of language. And one of the things you said, there were two words, in fact, in what you just said. The first is you said dead time. And I would urge you to choose a different name for that time. I would maybe call it living time, right? Because that's when you're really living, is when you're not preoccupied with, fuck, I've got to do this, or I have to be productive, or I've got to watch a YouTube video or consume a podcast. When you're standing out there in nature, just enjoying yourself, just being alive, that's living time. It's not dead time, right? And another thing you said is it's during dead time or living time that these things fester in your mind. And I would perhaps choose a different word than fester. It's during that time that these things bloom. They bloom in your mind. The good things literally bloom. They grow, they expand, like you have these moments of insight. So I don't know, to do with that what you will, but I think that's perhaps a healthier, more beneficial way to linguistically phrase what you were describing.
I absolutely love that. Thank you. The idea of the power of words and the power of the way we phrase things, I really, really believe that. And I noticed it with other people, and it's sometimes hard to notice it with myself. So I love it that you pointed that out. That's so true. The idea of just going out and letting thoughts bloom in my mind is so much more positive, inspiring. It gives me joy and motivation, just thinking, and happiness, just thinking about that word, as opposed to, you're right, just dead time, just sitting there wasting time.
Sure. Yeah, and remember, Lawrence, something that I just read recently on Reddit is doing nothing is a form of action, and it is a form of necessary action. Your organism requires periods of inactivity. It is absolutely essential. I mean, if you want to kill someone, fucking make them work nonstop, without any breaks, without any downtime. That's the people during the Industrial Revolution, or just, if I'm not mistaken, I could be getting this wrong, but there was a point where it was either during the Industrial Revolution or just before it, where the life expectancy of most people in England was like 30 or 40 years old, because they just worked themselves to death. It's like, I don't want to work more. I want to work less. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to be someone who's going to lie and be like, no, I just want to grind and go and fucking, no, dude. I want to work. I want to less, unless my work is something I really enjoy. If I'm enjoying it, yeah, then I want to do more of it. but I don't want to work harder just fucking for working harder's sake. That's pathological. It's weird. It's like, and if you really think about it, I watched this thing, it really illuminated for me a while back where that comes from. It's now a lot of people might perceive this as like some sort of socialist or Marxist ideology, but it's not. It's just something I observed, right? Which is, I get why. I was watching it was a documentary on the history of the United States, and it was showing like a bunch of factory workers in the early part of the 20th century. It was an old piece of footage, and they were just like working at these sewing machines. And I realized that's where this ethos comes from. The factory owner wants you to work hard. The harder you're working, the better it is for him. And he dangles in front of you the carrot of, oh, one day you could be the manager, or you could be the guy counting all the profits, right? Like, that to me is such a weak energy to build something off of. Oh, like, if I work really, really hard, I'll get a reward. First of all, you may not get the reward, right? Like, it's been proven many, many times that a lot of people work fucking hard and don't get anything for it. And secondly, it comes with a lot of heavy consequences because you're violating the emotional triad. You're going against your organism's fucking intrinsic DNA survival blueprint, which is conserve energy. Don't waste it, right? So for me, I'd rather find things I love and enjoy and that energize me and inspire me, and then try and build my work around them. Because then I'm not going against my nature. Then my nature is working with me.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, I think,
and it's in this book I'm reading now. It's such a wonderful book. The gentleman's explaining you can use self-discipline to go against your nature while you're young, because you have energy to spare. So you can keep this internal war within yourself of being like, I've got to go fucking work out. I've got to train. I've got to push myself. You can do that when you're young, but when you're old, you don't have enough energy to fight against yourself like that. So you have to optimize. Now, in your case, going to train and fight, you didn't actually need self-discipline because you loved it so much. It was something you loved.
Yeah, and that's so true about as you get older, you just don't have that, whether it's energy or the desire anymore to go against the things you don't enjoy doing. So I think that's great advice for anyone who's not where they want to be in life. There was a positive psychologist, Martin Seligman called it our signature strengths, the things that we're good at, that they bring us a lot of joy. And if you can incorporate those into your career, then that's the way to build a really good life. And I really love that. Last thing, Nick, it's so funny because I just got back from Italy. And one thing, every time I go to Europe, I feel like the stress in my back just loosens a bit. The pace of life there is so slow. The people are so much more present. You'll go outside and you'll see a bunch of people, and they're not all on their phones like they are in the West. They're much more in tune with just being in the moment. And they're Italy's very social culture. And every time I go back, I always think, I love America, just like you. You know, we're immigrants, and it was not easy for us to get here and get our citizenship. But we both love it. But at the same time, just when I hear you talking, you know, you're in LA, which is one of the most cutthroat cities in the world. And I know one of the reasons you like it is because it brings a fascinating, different group of people that I know you're very fond of. So I know you have that side, the social side. But I think it must be harder to live the way you're living in LA than if you lived in somewhere like Tuscany, where the pace of life among everyone around you was slower.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about that yesterday. I noticed it. You know, I've lived in this building for 3 years, and when I arrived, I was probably the first or second tenant because it's a brand new building. And a couple of weeks later, other people had started to move in, and I saw a guy in the parking lot who I hadn't met. You know, it was an underground parking lot. So I walked up to him and I said, "Hey man, I'm Nick. I'm in apartment 106." And I reached out to shake his hand, and he was just like, he kind of hesitantly like took my hand and shook it. And I was like, "What's your name?" And he was like, "What's with all the questions, man?" And I was like, I was taken aback. I was like, wow. And I just said to him, I just pulled my hand away, and I was like, "Bro, I was just trying to be a good neighbor. I was just trying to get to know my neighbors." And I see it in the way people drive as well. It's like everyone is fucking go, 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 go. They're all trying to get somewhere. And I'm like, where are you trying to get? You know what I mean? Like, what are you like? Why can't you just enjoy the drive to work or wherever you're trying? Why is it got to be like you're sitting on the guy's ass, going?
Yeah.
And that, I am going to be honest with you, that I don't really appreciate that about big cities. I don't think it's just Los Angeles. I think it's pretty much all big cities in the world, or most of them at the very least. And I think in East Asia, like specifically in Japan, I noticed it's a little bit less like that. I think just because of the Japanese cultural operating system, which is a little bit more predisposed to being present and self-observation and fitting in with the rest of society, as opposed to just being this guy on your own path, trying to like carve your own way, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think about moving out to like a smaller town in the United States where the pace of life is a little bit slower and there's more nature. I think about that all the time. But right now my path is here.
Well, last thing, brother, before we wrap this up, if you could give yourself a couple of words of wisdom to your younger self, maybe 10 years ago, and I know you probably touched on it today, but what is kind of the final thought that the wisdom that you'd give to yourself?
Life is just a game. And the way you play games the best is you don't take them seriously. You understand intrinsically that they're just games.
I love that. It just takes the edge off so much, right?
Yeah, I really am trying to keep that at the forefront of my consciousness now. I realized whenever I take things really seriously, the quality of my experience degrades. And whenever I'm lighthearted and playful with things, the quality of my experience improves. And I'm not actively trying to make things harder for myself. I think that's unintelligent.
I love that. It reminds me of what Neville Ravikant said. He said, the only true test of intelligence is getting the life you want. And that's basically exactly what you just said. I love that.
Wow, I love that too. Yeah, he's a genius, that dude. What a genius.
Brother, I always appreciate talking to you, and I'll bother you again for the next one. But thank you, Nick. Thank you for taking
Never bother me,
sharing
bro.
your wisdom.
Never bother me.